Everyone's hair. I want to touch it so bad. Oh my god, the effects on this are amazing. Final Fantasy 15 Kingsglaive, or Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15, is directed by Takeshi Nozue, written by Takashi Hasegawa. Oh my god, I butchered these names terribly. It stars Aaron Paul, Lena Headey, and Sean Bean, which of course we all know as the man that always dies. The story begins us with conflict with Lucius and Nibelheim, which are two opposing cities, over a conflict that arose over, I think it was a few years prior to the events of what we see in the movie. We are introduced to Kingsglaive, which is comprised of a few veteran soldiers that work specifically for the king. We are shown that they are kind of like the lapdogs of the army, which a lot of them ended up kind of despising. We are introduced to our main protagonist, Nyx, and Nyx is the one, like the idealist, where he believes that the world is kind of like no one is beyond saving. Immediately we are shown his characteristics of how he is right from the beginning of the movie, and this is where I think a lot of people would find some type of conflict with the character, that throughout the whole movie you kind of don't see any character development with him aside from him just trying to be loyal to who he really is, which is just his ideal of like everyone deserves a chance at life, kind of like most protagonists we see from video games like Tales of Symphonia, Final Fantasy VII. The ideal is there. And along with Nyx, we were also introduced to a few other characters, which one of them was a girl, I think her name was Raven or Ravis. Something happens to her later on in the end where causes one of the characters to defect from Kingsglaive and ends up turning to a rebellion that's kind of plotting to take down the kingdom itself of Lucius so they could get at the crystal. And shortly later we find out that something happens within the story that ends up causing the Citadel to be penetrated by Nibelheim, and Nibelheim tries to get their clutches on the crystals. So Nyx himself tries to task himself to stop Nibelheim from taking over the kingdom of Lucius, and tries to save the king while also saving Luna, which is caught in the conflict as well. Luna is the woman whom is to be wed to Noctis in the story, as to be some kind of leverage for the Niflheim to use as they see fit to kind of penetrate and some respite in a more subtle way the city of Lucius for the crystals, which is not really utilized, but they kind of tell her what she was mainly used for, or implied, if anything. The story structure of what you see in the movie did a good job of raising the stakes. The whole time you're just rooting for the characters and you're like, oh my god, are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it? I don't know, I want to find out. And there's a bunch of cameos in the whole story that you will love. There was a few characters that you notice and you're like, oh sweet. Well, not really characters, but it was monsters. When you notice these monsters, you're like, oh my god, this is totally the Final Fantasy I remember. I must admit, the visuals on this Final Fantasy are amazing. Once you see like the texture of the skin, you see like the texture of the clothing and everything that was put into this. The hair, oh my god, I love the hair. The hair was just like, I wanted to touch it. I was like, oh my god, look at how real that hair is. The Final Fantasy Square Enix engine that they're using, whatever it is, it's amazing. Even though by the end of the credits they show a little bit of the engines they worked with, and Maya was one of them, I'm like, alright, I'm at least familiar with that one. But they use, I think, at least about maybe 9 softwares that I saw on the end credit sequence, and they also worked with another company for that. One thing that also left me curious the whole time I was watching is like, alright, how is this going to coincide with the events of Final Fantasy 15 the game? Because from what I knew moving forward, the story is that it's happening simultaneously to the events of the game. So will Noctis eventually find himself back into this city that's all decrepit by the end of the movie? Or will you even meet any of these characters that are introduced into the cinema? Because most of them, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's stuff that happens and it begs the question, will he meet these characters, or should I even invest myself in this movie if it's not going to have any correlation to what's going to happen on the game? The cinematography they used for this, when they were cutting scenes, it kind of, for a minute, it was a little too fast. It was like cut, 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 kind of like Warcraft had that thing in the beginning where they're just trying to show you the environment, and it was cutting a little too much. They did something similar with this one, which I found got a little tiring at times, because your eye needs to rest every now and then when you're watching a movie, because if you're taking in too much, you get a little tired, and therefore you're a little overwhelmed for what they're trying to set up for you to take in as a viewer. The main theme was composed by Yoko Shimomura, but the rest of the music was handled by John R. Graham, which to me was a new, delightful thing to see, that it wasn't actually a Japanese composer for this entire movie, that it was actually handled by an English composer. He did a fantastic job. You listening to that soundtrack, it totally fit the theme. When you're watching the cinematography of what's taking place in the film, you totally feel the heaviness of what's at stake. It captures the intensity of the fight scenes. Though the fight did drag on a little bit, I felt by the end of it, when the movie was about to conclude and the moment of the climax where you have the final fight sequence, it was dragging a little bit too long, that you're kind of like, alright, we've established everything that's happened so far. You see the city being attacked by all these things, and betrayals were made, characters have perished. You're just left with this feeling like, all right, cool, let's just wrap this up. I still loved it, don't get me wrong, it's such a great sequence. The whole fight scenes, I think it probably lasts like a good 20 minutes, but it felt like it was dragging on a bit. By the time it concludes, though, you find out that Luna ends up having to traverse herself. She didn't want to have anyone from the Kingsglaive or the remaining Kingsglaive. She didn't want to have anyone from the remaining Kingsglaive perish. So she decides to head on by herself. There's an end credit sequence after all the credits roll, and you get a little taste of what it is you're going to experience in the game, which I thought was great. I was waiting the entire time. I was like, are they going to show it? Are they going to show it? Are they going to show it? They have to have something. And they finally gave it to us, which I was happy with. It was only like probably a 30-second video clip, but you by the end of it, you're just like, this is great. And ultimately paints the picture of the game. It kind of makes you curious. You're like, all right, I want to find out what happens to her. I want to find out where is Noctis in all of this. I want to find out, are we going to see this city all decrepit in the game? I want to find out if the Eidolons that were shown here, or the summons, will affect or be present or were present in the events of this game, which is interesting. Ultimately, the movie is a fun watch. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you're going to love it. And watch, I'm looking forward to seeing the events of what's going to happen in the game to unfold. This is totally worth having a Blu-ray copy of. Totally worth watching in the theater if you saw it already. If you haven't, are you planning to see it? I'd love to know. You could let me know in the comments. Musical Gamer here, and thank you for watching. You guys have a good one. Take it easy.